Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the All in Crypto podcast. I am your host, All in Crypto, and today I am nothing short of delighted to be joined by Ingo Rube, the CEO and founder of Kilt Protocol. How are you, Ingo?
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure. With all my guests, I really like to start with themselves. This is an interview that I'm particularly interested in doing because I love it when we see a broader application for a distributed ledger. It was Hal Finney himself that said Bitcoin is kind of a global database, and there's many applications for that. And I think Kilt Protocol is nothing short of a brilliant example of how we're utilizing this new technology that seems to be at the kind of forefront of many different industries to kind of further the application of a distributed ledger. So I always like to start with my guests with a little bit about themselves and maybe how you got into the crypto space and ended up at Kilt Protocol.
Yeah, that's easy. I can do that. I am actually a computer scientist, and I started off in the 90s of the last century as an entrepreneur. We had a company doing things in medical informatics, and I sold this in 2000, I think. And then I did something really unusual for an entrepreneur. I went into industry and just worked there as an employee because I had a great chance to jump into a huge corporation very much at the top already. And that was really interesting. You could learn a lot of things there. So I went to Axel Springer, which is, I think, one of the three biggest publishing houses in the world, and stayed there for, I think, 6 years. And then I moved over to another publishing house, but almost same size, where I worked as the CTO. So I have very much industry background and C-suite and all that. One of the things that you do as a CTO is that you do technology scouting. So basically you fly around on the world and visit conferences and see what's happening next. And I went to South by Southwest like every year. And I think it was 2015 or it was probably 2015 when the Ethereum team was there, basically talking about what they do. And actually, so I heard about Bitcoin before, but I didn't take it too seriously. But when I heard about Ethereum, I understood how important this technology is going to be for basically every sector. And so I flew back and went to the group board and said, we say we are a tech and media company. So here comes the tech part. There's a new technology coming up. This is going to be important for every industry. We have to do some movements there. And then we talked about that for quite a while and how could we implement blockchain somehow into the publishing industry. And then it turned out it's actually pretty far from the core business, but still we wanted to be somehow involved there. And then what we said is we just find a new CTO and let me play. So basically they said, you can have this company, we get a small share in the company, we take care that you don't have to talk with VCs, so we put enough money in so that you can do things. And you do something with blockchain and you just come back once a year and tell us what you do. So that's the deal. And this doesn't happen very often in one's life. So I definitely said yes. And then I was left on the 1st January 2018. I had this company, which I was the CEO of and which I was the majority shareholder of. And I took, of course, the best people from the big company, which also were working for me. And we actually had the playing field. It was not do something blockchain for publishing. It was do something blockchain. So we could have decided to just take the money, convert it into Bitcoin and wait until we got rich. But we thought maybe a little bit more interesting. And we thought, okay, we want to build something like the bridge between industry, because we know industry, we are well versed there, we know all the people, we can do contracts, we can speak on eye level with C-suite people, which not everyone does who is in crypto, and when we understand the technology, so how can we do the best? And the best would be probably bridging somehow between the two. And then the question is, what would actually be the normal industry first use case for blockchain? And then we looked at many different things, including finance and all sorts of things. And it came to, we understood at one point that probably identity is the best piece, because identity is broken in the crypto sector and it is broken in the internet. And if companies want to go internet and they need identity, then they would probably need a blockchain solution, and the blockchain people also need a better solution. So actually here you could do something really good. And this is how we got into identity. So this is what, that was the first 3 months of the company actually, where we decided to actually go into the identity space. So this is how I got into blockchain.
Brilliant. It sounds like the CTO that replaced you or maybe took over from you, maybe got the short end of the stick there whilst you got to play around in this exciting, you know, beautiful industry.
Yeah, well, the salary is much better in industry, I can tell you. So
yeah, I believe it. No, I totally believe it. But you know, really addressing this is the point that I brought up at the start, was it's amazing just how blockchain or distributed ledger technology, you know, we're seeing some people implement DAGs and things like this, which are a whole nother thing. It's really interesting just how this technology finds itself at the forefront of most industries, whether that be finance, whether that be, you know, whatever it may be. For example, what you guys are doing with identity. And I guess identity is kind of you've almost got the users there, right? If we're going to move on to a more and more digital world, everyone's ideally going to need a digital identity. How do you facilitate that? You know, I can really see why Kilt Protocol. And I guess that's how the ideas and the initial founding of Kilt took place. Was there anything in particular that you saw in the way that we do sort of Web 2 identities or traditional identities that you really didn't like and thought the blockchain can solve this problem?
Yeah, well, it was more like Web3. Web3 is a very old term, which actually was coined, I think, in 2016, 2017, something. Gavin Wood, the founder of Polkadot,
Yep.
actually was the first who said Web3. In the Web3, or the initial interpretation of Web3, it was thought that when you look at the internet has a couple of protocols, and those protocols can transport data, they can send an email, and they can basically transport the content of a website from a server to a client. This is what the internet can do, and the Web 2 was actually built on those protocols. But the Web 2 also built an economy which was never thought of when the initial people who built the internet were thinking about the internet. And so you need certain things, and one of them is identity, another is payment, and also that you're actually holding the possession of something, and stuff like that, and storage and computation and all these things. They have no protocols in the internet for that. And if you don't have a protocol, then some company normally comes and says, I can do that very well. So I'm pretty good in identity. My name is Facebook, so I give you a Facebook login button. And I'm pretty good in search, so I'm Google. So if you want to search, then everyone calls it to Google now. And if I'm pretty good in storage, then I'm AWS or something. And those companies tend to become monopolies. And this is what nobody ever thought of when they thought about in the transition from the Web 1 to the Web 2. And this is a huge problem, because monopolies are never good, because they have too much power, they can misuse the power, and so on. And identity is one of the things which have not been solved. And Web3 basically said, let's make a set of protocols, for example, for file storage, let's call it IPFS, for example, and put a coin on top of it, let's call it Filecoin. And in this way, make it a common good. So anyone can own a Filecoin, and then you own a part of the network storage. So that was the idea of the Web3. And of course, with Kilt, this is the same thing, just for identity. So the fundamental idea of the Web3 to actually build a protocol layer, at that time called a fat protocol layer, because it's the protocols are much fatter than TCP and IP. We need additional protocols to replace, or at least be an alternative to the monopolistic structures which we have built in the Web 2. Because you cannot just get rid of monopolistic structures by saying we don't like them. You have to bring an alternative. And the alternative must be a technology which brings you the same features, if not better features, than you had in the Web 2 and the monopolistic ones. This is the way how you move people over. So that was the initial idea of Web 3, and we were just part of this Web 3 movement.
Yeah, it's fascinating. You know, I've often heard these monopolies be called cloud lords and things like this, you know, and it's a very scary world, I think, without the decentralization of it that we could be moving towards. When you think about where the world's going and just how much more kind of digital it's becoming, if you look at the internet, there's basically three companies that have a monopoly over a lot of the infrastructure and a lot of the kind of software that's built around it. You know, Amazon, Apple, Google, you know, Facebook. I think there was a report that came out and Facebook did very well on it, or Meta now, where I think either Instagram, Facebook, or Meta and WhatsApp reached 4 billion people in the world. That makes that company unbelievably powerful. So the need to decentralize that, I mean, you know, Bitcoin, I guess, kind of spawned what we're seeing now in regards to the further application. Okay, we don't just want to facilitate a decentralized store of value or a money, if it could ever practically work as one. We want to now decentralize multiple different aspects of life, certainly digital life. And I think Kilt Protocol finds itself really nicely in that mix. So why did you initially start looking at Polkadot when you were coming together and saying, okay, how do we want to facilitate Kilt Protocol? Why Polkadot? What was the kind of thought behind that?
Yeah, so of course we were looking at different alternatives. When we were sure what we actually want to build, we needed some kind of base technology. We decided against just taking an empty hard disk and trying to build our own blockchain or stuff like that, because that is really, we didn't have enough mathematicians to actually build consensus mechanisms and stuff like that. So we actually needed to build on something. Of course, we were looking at Ethereum. Ethereum at the time was not the thing that we would choose, because we would have been a smart contract, and as a smart contract you can't really put the complexity that you see in identity, can't really put that in a smart contract. It's too small and not flexible enough. And also the gas cost is a problem, because when you use, so identity is something that must be open and available for everyone, and it must be possible to, with very, very low cost, to actually get yourself an identity on chain or something. And if a transaction costs several $100s or something, when we have CryptoKitties time or something, then this is basically not, this doesn't work. So we found out we have to have our own chain so that we can control the gas cost and keep it low so that people can actually use the stuff. And at that time, there was not many development environments for blockchains. Basically, there were two. And we looked at both of them, and Polkadot was so far ahead from technology-wise and implementation-wise. It was in September, October 2018, and Substrate was there. It wasn't really very well documented, but you could basically take it and start building something on it. And we didn't see that anywhere else. So we actually came because we needed something, a toolbox with which we can build a blockchain rather easily, and it was the best thing on the market at the time. That was the initial decision why we went to Polkadot. And they were very much in the same mindset of Web3 and all that stuff. So they also matched there very well. And over time, we noticed that a really nice community is building up on Polkadot, because Polkadot is not as competitive as others, I would say. So in Ethereum, when you are building a smart contract, you automatically compete for the computation time of the big thing, right? The Ethereum. And in Polkadot, you actually don't, because you compete at slot auctions, but then for 2 years you have your slot, and you're basically forced to cooperate, because Polkadot is more like a big machine which gets better with anything that is provided by the parachains, because they can communicate with each other, and you can actually use other parachains for doing things, and so you are forced to collaborate. And this collaborative spirit was actually then I was actually really surprised that we have that, and this is why I never regretted to have made this decision.
Yeah, it's something I've always found with Polkadot is certainly as far as the parachains are concerned, they all seem to be working with one another. You've got this real beautiful kind of connected ecosystem. You know, I often say I think Polkadot has one of the richest ecosystems in the entire crypto space. I just think it's largely undiscovered, if I can say that. But I think it's really going to come to the forefront. And something that I'd love to ask you as somebody who's been following Polkadot for a while, who's kind of gone through and built upon it, the changes that it's seen is, what do you think about Polkadot 2.0, and how do you personally think this is going to affect Kilt Protocol, if at all? Do you think it's going to bring benefits? Do you think it's going to have cons? You know, what's your kind of thought on that? Because I think people make Polkadot 2.0 a little bit more complicated than perhaps it is. The parachain model, I think, was a great one, but of course we know the whole auction model is perhaps a bit restrictive for many. I think this new sort of lease of life that Polkadot is taking on is going to really see the ecosystem expand and benefit all the projects within it. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I can't think too much about it because it's not really there yet. So,
Yeah.
From I can see, I can measure the effects that it will initially have on us. This is very little because when you already have a parachain, you basically have this grandfathering for another 2 years, right? So you get your core time for not too much fluctuating price, which is totally okay. So we don't have to. We are not like really in panic now. We have to change everything. We don't want to do that. We try to be the most conservative project of them all because we work with big companies and governments and stuff like that. So we're not very jumpy. So we're not changing everything because somebody says, oh, there's a new cool feature. So we stay as we are, first of all, and then we look at it, and then we see what great opportunities and so on is going to come out of that, and that we have 2 years for. And in these 2 years, we will definitely change in some way or form, but I cannot predict how this is going to be. But of course, we are watching that with much interest. And then also second, what you said is right. So the parachain model was economically not the biggest idea for Polkadot, actually. So because we basically we have a lot of core time and we don't utilize it correctly. And I think probably what was the mistake that was made was probably thinking that all the parachains, when they're on board, they are momentarily totally successful, which is not expectable, actually, because that's all startups, and startups may become successful, but definitely not on day one. So that produces a lot of empty block space, unused block space, and this had to be changed, and now it's going to change. And with Jam coming up, there's so many other changes which are coming up, which I'm still digesting, because I learned a lot about Jam this week, because that was the Sub-Zero week. And I'm still digesting, and I cannot really make out what all differences this is going to make. But I'm pretty excited. And what I like about that is that the movements that Polkadot makes, when you look at other chains or other systems, Polkadot is so much faster. So I heard so often Polkadot is slow. No, it is not, because Polkadot is able to make experiments like the parachains, see that they work, but they don't work out in one particular direction, which is economics, to the perfect way, and then say, not say like others would maybe do, okay, let's scrap it and start new and something. They are able to understand the problem, to look at the problem, to resolve the problem, talk about the solution, and then deliver the solution. And this all within a year now. When you look at core time, right? It was in June last year when Gavin first talked about the issue and his approach to solving that. I think without a single line of code written on this whole thing, well, what we hear is going to go live on Kusama in the next couple of days. Yep. So that is actually a pretty amazing speed, I would say. And it is also, I think it shows how educated and adult the people behind the system are, because admitting that you possibly went into a direction which is not going to be successful after all is very, very big, right? So you have to have a lot of strength to admit this and say, here we got wrong, but here we got the solution, and now we're going to change a lot of things. So that was, yeah, I think I'm at the right place.
Yeah. It's like you said, there's a lot to digest with the whole thing. Of course, it's not live yet. I wasn't quite sure when it was going to go live on Kusama. I did know it was coming. I thought it would be a week or something like that. So really excited to see how all that plays out. But there's also a lot besides just the actual model of acquiring a core or a piece of a core that's actually changing. So it's going to be really interesting. And the point that you bring up about how things have moved so fast in the crypto space, things typically don't move that fast, you know, and it just, like you say, is a huge testimony to the people that are working on Polkadot and kind of engineering and designing it.
Just think about how long Ethereum actually moved from proof of work to proof of stake.
Yep.
So I think the first announcement was probably in 2017.
Something like that, yeah.
And then a couple of years until it actually happened. So this is the speed of other chains if they do fundamental changes. And in Polkadot, this is all possible within a year. That shows a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, and that's certainly a unique selling point moving forwards that Polkadot has. You know, it's got so many unique selling points. It's interesting on the topic of Ethereum, how their roadmap somewhat resembles, I guess, in some ways, Polkadot. You know, this idea of taking everything off the layer one and having almost like parallelized systems in the form of layer twos and sharding and stuff like that that they're looking to do. You know, I kind of feel like Polkadot was very right on so many things. And the fact that I guess Gavin had the humility, it's not really humility, I guess, to kind of come out and say, okay, well, this way that we initially envisioned isn't optimal. I'm going to hold my hands up and say, let's go the other way. Huge testament to, I know there's quite a few blockchains out there that have almost doubled down on mistakes.
Yeah, and not doing that is, and what you say about Ethereum is also pretty interesting, because when there was a list which was never published, it was just circulated internally in 2018, what Polkadot can do and what Ethereum actually can't do, or where Ethereum actually stinks. Of course, it was never published because that is not nice to compare yourself to others. But when you look at this list again, unfortunately, I can't share it. You can see that most of the points which were there, which Polkadot could do and Ethereum couldn't, in the meantime, Ethereum can do them, right? Because so they were basically just running a little bit behind, but solving a lot of problems. One of them being, of course, proof of stake and not proof of work and all that. But there were like 10, 12 points. And I think 8 of them are now solved also by Ethereum, which is pretty nice because it shows how far ahead the Polkadot thinking is normally. So if you want the new stuff right away, then you have to go to Polkadot because you already get it here. And I'm pretty sure that the ideas which are now around Jam, because they are, well, they're proposing a transactionless blockchain, which is quite new. So these things will probably, we will see them in a couple of years also in other chains, I would assume. So it's really spearheading the technology, which is good.
Yeah, I think it's really at the forefront in many respects. I think it kind of comes from Gavin, you know, starting off on Ethereum, playing a fundamental role there. Was Parity Technology called ETH Dev at one point?
Yeah,
I think it might have been.
Yeah.
It might have been, yeah, right at the start. So it's kind of that whole, you know, breaking away, coming up with a new and deemed better vision and building it. And then it's interesting how you kind of see Ethereum following, which to me kind of lets us know we're in the right place, I think. Let's dive into Kilt Protocol. Let's actually give a kind of broad view, because some people are new to this whole idea of digital identity. Some people are new to Kilt, some people are new to Polkadot. So everyone's at a kind of different stage. But if we could give maybe as simplistic as possible kind of overview of Kilt Protocol and what it is you guys are looking to facilitate.
Okay, I have to start a little bit with identity, because people normally say identity and they don't really think about what it is. So let's make a little bit like a detour through identity. So identity, everyone has one in a way, and identities are composed of 2 things. One thing is an identifier that is in the physical world, for example, your face, your fingerprint, your signature, things that you own, things that you have created yourself. No one ever gave it to you. They are not, they cannot be switched off. So nobody can say you don't own your face anymore. It's mine now. That is not possible. And they make you pretty unique, and you control 100% if you sign something or not. So you have them under control. So we have something in the physical world which is absolutely decentralized because everyone has their own. It's not getting better. But this is not identity yet. This is just identifying people. And identity is much more. It also says that you, I don't know, you can drive a car, you're a citizen of this country, you are a member of the fishing club of the public library, and you have a university degree. All that together is your identity somehow. And the other things are represented by so-called verifiable credentials. A verifiable credential is a thing which is issued by a trusted entity, not by everything by one trusted entity. So the driver's license department is going to give you your driver's license, but the fishing club is going to give you a fishing license, and your university is going to give you your master's degree. So that's different trusted entities, but they all own trust in some way or form. And they give you plastic cards or pieces of paper, and you own those pieces of paper. And they're always somehow connected to your identifiers. Think of your driver's license as a picture of your face in it, so that you can use that there. And the cool thing about those is that it's half decentralized, because anyone can actually become a trusted entity. So it's only one. And the other thing, it's also totally distributed, because you own your credentials and you decide when to show your credentials to whom and so on. So they are in your pocket, they're not at the university. And if you then use your credentials for doing things, for example, applying for a new job, you use your university degree, the university is not going to be asked, right? You just take this paper and you file it into your new employer, and they see, okay, cool, university, I want this guy. And the university is not part of this transaction, which means that they cannot keep track. And this is really, really important, because it gives you a lot of privacy. When you go to, I don't know, if you use your driver's license for going to the alcohol shop and buy a whiskey every day, that would be probably information which is interesting for your insurance or something. They will never know, because the identity transaction is purely between you and the shop. And that is pretty cool. So in the physical world, we had an identity system which was absolutely fantastic, privacy preserving, decentralized. So we can't really make it better with blockchain, to be honest. Yeah. Then we have the system in the internet, how we use it today. And this is basically your digital identity is a database entry in Facebook, because you have your Facebook account, and you can link your Facebook account basically to everything else. So there's this Facebook login button, and then Facebook and the other guys talk about you, and if they like you, they let you into their website. The problem there is, if you're using this website to buy whiskey, then Facebook actually already knows. And they start collecting this, and so they have this phone home button, which we don't want, right? So the privacy is gone. You don't own your credentials. You are not aware when your credentials are used, for what they are used. So you basically gave up all the control that we have had in the physical world. You give up in the digital world. And this is fundamentally wrong. And so something has to be changed about that. So it's not that Kilt Protocol came and said, we have the solution. This would be awkward a little bit, because a company of our size cannot say, okay, now we're going to fight Facebook. This is not going to work. And this notion, not only we had, but also others. I think the movement was actually spearheaded by IBM and Microsoft, because if we as Facebook, we as Microsoft and IBM, we are much too small to fight Facebook in the identity space. So we have to build an alliance of lots of people and governments and companies, and come to one point, and that point is the point of standardization. So digital identity has to be standardized as an internet protocol, basically, and so that everyone can basically rely on that people can make implementations of it on the server side, on the client side, on the verifier side, on the issuer side, so all these things, so that people can build software that just have to adhere to a standard. And this was the Decentralized Identity Foundation, which was founded, I think, in 2017. We were there from the beginning, and put our brains into the standard and helped as good as we could to formalize all that. And then in 2021, finally, 2022, finally, the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, signed DIDs, which is the output of this, and verifiable credentials as a standard. So now everyone knows how digital identity works without Facebook. And what it is basically digital implementation of what we already had in the physical world. So you again have your identifiers, you build your identifier yourself. There's trusted entities, they're now called issuers. They issue credentials to you, you hold them in your wallet, and you can show them to verifiers without the issuer knowing that you showed them. So that is basically, it sounds very simple. It is were 350 companies with more than 1,000 scientists on the board thinking and working on that for, in the end, 5 years. So that was quite a lot of work which was put into that. And now the question, what is Kilt? Kilt is, I would say, the reference implementation on blockchain of these standards. We were there, we were able to implement everything that came out of the working groups right away, test it, play with it, and actually now we got, I think, the most complete blockchain implementation of DIDs and verifiable credentials, which is there on the planet. Yeah, this is basically what we have. In a nutshell, how do you use Kilt? Kilt is an infrastructure, which means there's no program called Kilt. You can think of it a little bit like electricity. Yeah, so it's really bare infrastructure. If you want to build, if you say, hey, I have a lot of trust in the real world because I'm a university, I want to issue my degrees now as verifiable credentials in a digital form, you can use pieces of software from the Kilt Protocol, which we supply, and build your issuer. And you can use the blockchains the Kilt blockchain to store certain information. For example, you can have your DID, the public part of the DID, published on the Kilt blockchain. You can anchor your credentials, which you generate, and put the validity of those credentials on the Kilt blockchain so that everyone can see them and stuff like that. So it's the blockchain is a pure facilitator for the identity protocol which we implement.
Yeah, and of course, you own, if you go and you choose to do this through Kilt, the information that you've put out there. So it's very different. I think that was one of the best analogies in regards to how Facebook works, the fact that they've got all your data. You know, they can tell or they could if they wanted to, they have the data on you going and buying some whiskey every day. You don't own that. It's no longer your data. Data is very valuable. I think that was one of the best analogies I've ever heard in regards to the problem and actually what the solution could be. And the solution, you guys certainly think the solution is Kilt Protocol. I want to kind of maybe unpack that a little bit further and talk actually about, let's say I wanted to set up a DID. Mm-hmm. What does the process of that look like? And All in Crypto wants to set up a DID. He wants to use Kilt Protocol. How do I go about doing that? And then once we've addressed that, we'll maybe move on to how all of this is kept private and actually empowers you with your own data. You own the data that you're putting out or want to put out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the first thing, the most important thing of a DID is you don't get a DID from us. You don't get it from anyone because it's your identifier and it is like your face and your fingerprint. You have to make it yourself. So there's no way around that. If there's any, just as a warning for everyone, if there's a company which is going to sell you your DID, this is wrong, right? This is
brilliant. Yeah.
Because then they produce the DID for you and they know it, and they should. So the first thing that you have to do when you want to have a DID, you can download a identity wallet. So we supply something which is called Sporon, but Sporon is open source. You can also take Sporon, just brand it differently and use it as your wallet, so everyone can do that. And this thing, as a user, I download, I start, and say I want a DID, and this thing is going to compute a DID for me. Very, very similar to computing like a crypto address, which is also made on your computer, hopefully. If it's made by someone else, then this is a problem because someone has the private key, right? So the DID is generated on your device. We can, if you don't want to download that for the Polkadot people, there's also a possibility to do that in Polkadot.js. So you don't necessarily need to download a Sporon wallet, but you can also, of course, use Nova Wallet and so on. So they also can do that for you.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So
So once I've decided that I want to open up a wallet or create a wallet in much the same way, do you get a seed phrase with it? What does that look like?
you can, well, that depends very much on the wallet. So there's different ways. So for example, in the Sporon, you really get a seed phrase, 12 words. Is not necessary if you think that you want to do it differently. So we have people who use that, who say, well, our customer base is not going to use 12 words and write them down. This is not going to work. So you can basically lock it up with a password. You can even make a centralized service which can recover your whatever you want. It's totally open. It's not defined by the protocol how it is secured. So there's people who want to build this together with just a fingerprint on the phone and stuff, whatever you like. So this is in the, as I say, we are just the infrastructure. So the only thing that we can supply is the reference implementation of the wallet, which is seed phrase, which is secure enough, I would say, for basically any purpose. But if there's others who say we want that a little bit less secure, so one company which uses Kilt also built in a possibility in the Sporon to download the seed phrase, which you actually don't have in a wallet, right? But this is good for our customers because they want to download that just for being safe or transporting it to other devices. If they want it like that, they can do it like that. That is basically, we don't care.
Yeah, yeah. And then you can use this DID once it's been sort of enabled to, I guess, log in, of sorts.
Yeah, that is a very easy use case and a very nice use case, logging in with the DID and maybe also with a credential. So because DIDs alone, well, there are just DIDs.
Standard, yeah.
It's just a bunch of keys and a bunch of private keys and a bunch of public keys. And the public keys you can basically write on a blockchain and say, this is my DID. And then you can start adding information to that. So for example, first you would probably add a Web3 name, which is a human readable, unique name, which can also identify your DID because a DID looks like a crypto address. No one can remember that. So you normally attach a name to it, and this is stored on chain so that if somebody tells the chain your name, then the DID pops out so that you can basically reference that. You maybe also want to add a couple of crypto addresses to that. So I'm represented here on this chain by this address and this chain by that address and so on. You can do that, of course, also with Ethereum. It's not only Polkadot. But it really becomes interesting when you start adding credentials. That is the most important thing, because they say that you actually are something, can do something, you reached some goal or whatnot. And so there's, the easiest example is maybe the social KYC. Social KYC, that's a little service that is provided where you can basically prove to the service that you own certain social media accounts, like a Twitter account. So you tell the service, this is my Twitter account, then the service says, yeah, really, tweet this, and gives you a line. And if you tweet the line, then the service looks at Twitter and sees if this line is really tweeted by this, and then gives you a credential about you actually own this Twitter address. And you can do the same with GitHub and whatnot. And then you get those credentials into your identity wallet, and then you own them, right? And then you can start using that, for example, for login. So if you need an email address or a valid email address or a special email address which ends with kilt.io because you want to use the or internal services here, then you can send your DID and your credential that you have a certain email address or that you have an email address at all in one go, without always going back and getting an email and clicking on the email button then and saying, yeah, I was actually responding to that. So this can be made more efficient. This is what people, what companies actually like, because it makes it more efficient for their users, and it gives them an alternative to log in with Facebook in the end, right?
Yep.
Because you can identify your customer, your partner in a way that doesn't require a third party. And there is a certain percentage of the population who really care about their data. This is if you ask, do you care about the data, then 70% say, yes, I care about the data. If you ask, okay, would you use something else than Facebook for your data, then it's 10%. But these 10% are still an important group, right? And as a big company, it is quite useful if you, so we're working with Axel Springer, for example, that big publishing house. They have millions and millions of customers or readers. And of course, 10% of that is quite an interesting number. This is why they're interested in actually getting a login without Facebook or Web3 login onto their paid content pages.
Yeah, no, fascinating. My mind's just expanding in regards to all the ways that you could use a DID. You know, if you think about the world that we're moving towards and the tokenization of everything and DeFi, you know, maybe in order for you to do something in the financial world, you're going to need certain credentials that you can have all onboarded on a DID. You know, you can have everything there. You can maintain it so that your data isn't shared here, there, and everywhere, but you have a verifiable way with this digital ID to track all of that. And that's just one use case. Maybe you want to apply for a job or...
Exactly. It's not only the usual suspects like the universities and so on, but it's also, it can be key opinion leaders which say, yeah, I worked with this guy together for 10 years and he's actually doing good things, right? That can be a very valuable credential if you want to do something in crypto. Also that maybe that that you have a verified Ethereum address could be valuable in some way or form later if more regulation comes in, and all these things. And then who's going to prove that? Probably maybe the centralized exchanges are going to play a big role in that, because they are big and they have a certain trust, some of them, and that could be an interesting business model. And this is what I find most interesting about that. The identity business is a huge business when you think of it, because issuing credentials is one of the things which so many companies and governments and so on and NGOs do, and they normally charge you for that. So if you lose your driver's license, you get a new one, but you have to pay 50 euros or something to get the new one, because there's some work behind that. And there's also, like when you bring your car to the annual checkup, then they also charge you, but they also have to look, right? Because they are putting their trust in this little piece of paper or piece of plastic that they give you and say, this car is good for another 2 years. So they can lose trust, right? So and there's a business, and this business, if you take together all the universities and the car people and whatnot, and banks and crypto exchanges and so on, this is a $1 trillion business actually,
easily.
The credentialing. And to get this digitized, one thing is necessary, and that is the standardization of how digital identity and verifiable credentials actually look like. And this is what we have now. And this is where we see that big companies from industry, not only from the crypto industry, mostly actually from outside the crypto industry, and governments starting to jump on this thing and say, now it's possible, now we have the standardization, now we can invest in this thing, because everyone's going to do exactly like that. And this is where the interesting projects now come from.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I probably lose my passport once a year, probably on average, you know, and then it's always a nightmare. Usually it's under the car seat or somewhere like that. But to have all this digitized and sort of verified in a decentralized manner, it's the next step. You know, it's the evolution of identity. It's not replacing the initial kind of identities that we were kind of born with, or the identifiers that we were born with, but this idea of being able to identify ourselves digitally with having control of our own data is huge. And I think some people, I think it was totally accurate what you said there. If you ask people, do they care about data? 70% might say yes. But then when you ask them if they wouldn't use Facebook as a result, it's a smaller number because everyone's so used to it. But it's going to become more and more of a problem. And I think more and more people are waking up to just how valuable data is, how important it is in the economy that we're moving towards. And actually, yeah.
Point of how dangerous it is to be dependent on such a thing. So if I log in with Facebook, well, what can happen to me if Facebook doesn't like me and kick me out? Then I don't have this stream anymore. Well, but if I log into 200 services using my Facebook login and Facebook doesn't like me anymore, then I'm cut off the 500 services or 200 services. And this is particularly dangerous, I would say, if governments now jump into this thing and try to be the new Facebooks, which in some governments happens, because they say, we give you your digital identity. This is a case where you don't make your DID yourself, but you get this from the government, which, well, sounds practical for us, but if the life goes more and more digital, and at one point your social security belongs to that, and also your retirement money and your healthcare hangs on this thing, then if the government changes at one point, which can always happen, and then there's people who don't like people with glasses in the government, then where's my social security? Because they can just switch it off. And having something in your identity which cannot be switched off, like my signature, my face, and stuff like that, is absolutely valuable. And we have this in the physical world, and it is so important that we preserve that and just don't give it up for some kind of, let's say, more convenience or something. And this is really, it could become a huge social problem, because the government who wants to do something like that will always tell you, well, you can trust us. Yeah, maybe I can trust you, but I can't trust the government, which is the next government, because I don't know what this is going to be. And it can be really awful, and especially in democracies. So
yeah, probably
it's really dangerous. So collecting personal data and then being and controlling identities is something that should not be given out of the individual. So it's really dangerous if Facebook switches me off. Yeah, well, that can happen. But if my social security is switched off, I don't like it.
Yeah, no, it's just in the whole ethos of this entire movement. You know, what we're doing is trying to take back the power, I guess, from the cloud lords, from the people that have such a control over the world. And I mean, I'm, like I say, my background was in dentistry, so I've had to catch up very, very fast in regards to the world that we now live in and where it's heading. And I can only see it getting to this kind of dystopian, I don't think is the word, but escalating very quickly into a world where it's almost entirely digital. And if you have the likes of Facebook that own half of the world's identities, that's an issue. That's a bigger issue than a kind of bad government, in a sense. You know, they almost become more powerful than governments in that. So this need to decentralize identity, it's huge. And it's not just, I want to come on to identity for machines in just a second, because I am a big fan of the Internet of Things. I say fan, that's probably not the right word, but I'm a big sort of follower of it. I think this is what the real metaverse actually is the Internet of Things in this digital world. And actually what you guys are doing and digital identities don't just apply to human beings, they apply to machines also, and actually help us facilitate that.
Exactly. That works nicely. So there's actually, so when you talk about things, there's two different types of things. There's the things that can compute, and then there's things which can't compute. So for example, we have a really nice project together with the German Energy Association, which is part of the Ministry for Economics. And what they are doing is they want to balance the grid in Germany better by knowledge, by knowing how much electricity can a certain house or other entity actually produce and consume. So they need to know the consumption, and they also need the production. Production is there because a lot of people have solar roofs and stuff like that, so they're also producing. And those solar roofs change, right? So you may start with 5 kilowatt, then you say, actually on the shack, there's another room for 2, and then it changes. And so there's not much knowledge about how much electricity can actually come out of a single household. But they all have smart meters, or they're getting smart meters now. So a smart meter is a machine which actually has a computer inside, which also has cryptographic primitives on totally nice. And we can use that for giving the smart meter a machine identity. And it gets credentials from, for example, the service people who install the solar roof on the shack. And then it has a little bit more power to actually produce. And this can be shared with computers which are trying to balance the grid much better. And in this way, the project is not really implemented, but it's going, now we're getting other people involved, like also those the manufacturers of electric cars and the people who actually have those loading stations for the charging stations for the electric cars and so on. They're now all playing in this project to better balance everything, because when there's 8 people who want to charge an electric car with 200 kilowatt at the same time, that also pulls down the grid. And so there's lots of information, and all these things, they get their identities now. That is really, really interesting. And so it is calculated that it should be possible to save between 5 and 10% of the total consumption of a country in electricity by the end, because you're not wasting electricity anymore. Because when you have too much electricity at one point, it just has to be burned, and you cannot just shift somewhere else. If you knew before how much electricity is going to come from here and how much is going to be used there, you can save between 5 and 10% of the total energy consumption or electricity consumption of a country. And Germany is also on the way of getting this then, if it's ever really proven that it really saves so much energy, then Germany is going to export that to other countries as well. There's a lot of interest, especially from South America. So there's actually interesting things happen. And this is where you need machine identities for machines which can compute. And then there's things which can't compute. For example, an NFT. An NFT is a pretty stupid thing, just a piece of data. Yep. And you can't really put DIDs and verifiable credentials on an NFT, because you need the possibility to compute, because everything that is every verifiable credential that is shown actually requires the action of showing something, and the signing with the DID. So the verifiable credential is signed with the DID and then sent out, so that the verifier can actually see, okay, that was actually the person sending this and not someone who just sent something. We also have a nice possibility, we call them asset DIDs, for inactive machines like NFTs, which we implemented alongside the chain agnostic improvement protocols, which is also pretty cool. So even that is somehow possible. Of course, in that case, there's less privacy, because in this case, we have to put the credentials directly on chain, yep, which is not GDPR compliant, but it is okay because it is not about persons. So this just works for NFTs, and NFTs are not persons, so GDPR does not apply. So you can have an on-chain credential, basically, which is public to everyone, but this may only point to a thing, while the normal verifiable credential that we use is in the wallet of the person or of the thinking machine, of the machine which can compute, and only shared because they want to share it. So that is the difference.
Yeah, again, it's just amazing just how blockchain finds itself at the kind of convergence of all these technologies, the Internet of Things, you know, tokenization, DeFi. I'm even seeing healthcare companies use distributed ledgers at this point. It's mind-blowing. And if you think about the Internet of Things, and you've got all these things, the ones that can compute, the ones that can't, the ones that can compute talking with one another and feeding back reliable data, there has to be a way to verify them. Otherwise, somebody could just plug whatever it is in and mess up the whole thing. So it's not just applicable to human beings and identity, it's also applicable to machines. And I think machines are going to become much more a part of all of our lives, certainly as they get smarter, more connected. You know, the scope for this is absolutely huge. And talking about partnerships and use cases, I know that you guys are partnered with Deloitte. Could we maybe explore that partnership a little bit? Because Deloitte, massive company. I was saying to you, I've got 2 brothers in finance. They both are well aware of who Deloitte is. I'm very impressed actually with that partnership. Could we maybe explore what that partnership entails and how Deloitte are utilizing Kilt?
Yeah. Yes. Deloitte, as you said, is a company which does a lot of things, accounting firm maybe, but they have two quite interesting things. So the first thing is everyone knows them and a lot of people trust them because they're so huge and they're there for hundreds of years, and they are basically auditing the governments, many governments, which means that also governments somehow trust them. So that is really valuable. So they have a huge bag of trust with them. And the best thing that, I said that before, the best thing that you can do if you have trust, you can monetize that trust with verifiable credentials. The second thing that they have is that they have a KYC business. So KYC is this thing that you always go through when you want to open a bank account or sign up with a new exchange and whatnot. You can do that with a small company normally, and this company somehow is then connected with the bank that you are dealing with, and the bank somehow trusts the small company, and you can go through this KYC process, but it just works for this one bank, for this one instance, and because it's a one-to-one connection between the bank and the small firm. What Deloitte did in the past is that they made reusable KYC credentials. So you could go there as a company, for example, as a European company, say, we want to buy several other companies in Asia, and we need, so the people who are flying over actually need to have some sort of paper which says that they can act on behalf of the company. And this is what you were going to Deloitte for. They were checking if you really, in all the books there and registers, if you really were entitled to do so. And then you got a paper with a stamp, Deloitte, saying this guy can actually, on behalf of this company, buy companies in Asia. And there you go to a notary service and say, sign it. So that is a business that they had. That was, of course, not the hugest business because that doesn't happen too often, but they have the expertise to do that. And their idea was there's so much KYC in the world, and all the KYC is not transferable, not reusable, because it's only for one case. There is actually a huge business case for us because we could offer digital KYCs to basically everyone and charge a lot of money for that because we are Deloitte, because they would be accepted everywhere.
Yep.
Okay, now we can do that in the Web2 way, but as we are coming from paper, let's leapfrog to Web3 and also do it in a standardized way. So the project started at the point where the standardization from the W3C was through and DIDs were standardized. So they could invest in this and say, okay, now we're going to do DIDs and verifiable credentials, and we want to do it the Web3 way. So we need something with a blockchain. So what can we use? Well, there's this one complete implementation of it's called Kilt. Let's work with those guys. This is how it came together, actually. And what is particularly nice for us on this thing is that it is self-growing. So what Deloitte does is that they want to grow their business now because they see that they earn money with it. Now they're looking for new opportunities, how they can actually hugely accelerate their production of verifiable credentials, which is very good for Kilt. And so they're building new projects like, I don't know if you heard about that, the KYX project, which is around cargo, that includes companies like Hapag-Lloyd and other big cargo companies. What they're doing is that they register every single sender with a DID, and that they also somehow track the package from the sender inside the container, tracking the container and until it is actually opened again and the package is taken out in a different country. So there's a lot of data which is going to move around there, and so they're pushing this very much because for them it's a nice business, because tons of KYC credentials and KYB credentials are needed for that, and this is how Kilt now grows without us doing much actually about that. So we are in the project, we are of course consulting the people and talking to them, but we're not we don't really build a lot, right? It's more like they use the infrastructure. This is the nice thing when you build infrastructure. At one point, people start just using it.
Yep. Yeah, no, fascinating. That was a partnership. I know it's been about for a while now, or been certainly in talks. I think it was a year or so, perhaps, before it was even announced. So it's been around for a long time. It's one that really caught my eye, and it's always nice to see people actually using this technology. You know, and who better than Deloitte to be kind of showcasing that? I know that there was a recent announcement. So we've spoken about a DID. I know there was a recent announcement in regards to a DIP. Could we maybe explain the difference there and what that is?
Yeah, so the DIP, as we call it, the DIP is actually a decentralized identity provider. So when you yeah, so identity provider is what Facebook today is. There's a process. You as a company can go and say, I sign on there, I get this Facebook login with Facebook button, and then a user comes to my website, and then there's a certain protocol, and the token is issued. Well, not such a token, not a coin, but a token is issued. This is stored in my browser, and then I can use this this service. And the identity provider is always the Facebook in that case. Of course, you can use in the Web 2 world, you can now use Kilt and use Kilt as a decentralized identity provider because we're decentralized, much better. We're not storing any data. The data is stored with the users, so quite safe to use us. But this only works for applications. Now in the Polkadot world, we see lots of so-called parachains, right? And parachains are working a little bit different because parachains can't really ask things. They can't use an RPC interface. Normally, an application uses an RPC interface and asks the Kilt blockchain, okay, which DID does Ingo have? You put in Ingo and you get a DID back. This is something that that the blockchain cannot do because it's working transaction for transaction, and this does not happen. So we were thinking, how can we better collaborate with the parachains actually? Because every parachain seems to have their own identity problem, and some parachains are building something, and some other parachains are basically just telling us that it's actually bad that they can't use us. So we said we have to sit down and build something using mechanisms inside the Polkadot world where we can act as a decentralized identity provider inside the Polkadot world and facilitate identity for other parachains. And this works now with pallets, for those who know what pallets are. So there's two pallets that we put out. One is the provider pallet. This is something which is integrated in Kilt. So Kilt is an identity provider, but we are not the only ones. So anyone who runs a parachain and has a better concept about identity, please go ahead, use the same palette, put it into your parachain, then you are an identity provider. We're even happy to do and to have that because it opens more choice for the people using the system. So please do, it's open source. So it's just a palette. That's the provider palette. And then there's the consumer palette, which needs to be implemented by any parachain who wants to use the DIP. And then they can start communicating. So once you have a DID, say on the Kilt protocol, you can export that to another parachain, and then it is available on the other parachain. And you can, and as the other parachain, you can, for example, in your runtime have certain extrinsics which can only be executed if you have a certain DID or if you have a DID at all, which makes it absolutely powerful because you can really use it inside the blockchain runtime if somebody is identified or not. And that is a really nice thing. And it's now going to be implemented by Invarge, I think first by Polymech, then Invarge. But we have also others who are already thinking about how to implement that. And we were just at the Sub-Zero talking about that stuff. And we're really happy to see such great feedback because that is apparently something useful that we have built. And it's also really nice technology. It uses state proofs for those who are interested in that, which is extremely fast and extremely cheap. So there's no transactions going through XCM costing money or something like that. It's just using the relay chain basically as a proof that things are happening. Fantastic.
Wow,
so
fantastic. Yeah, solving so many issues here, and issues that need to be addressed, and doing it all in a decentralized manner. You know, it's great to see. At the start, I had said you know, the reason I was so excited about doing this interview was because it's always refreshing to see the broader application of distributed ledger technology. And this is a massive use case for it that you guys are really at the forefront of, and doing an excellent job at it. What do you think your future? Now, this might be a bit of a hard question. What do you think your future plans are? So if I ask you in 10 years' time, Ingo, where do you see Kilt Protocol? Where would you like to see Kilt Protocol? Where would you like it to be?
Um, I would like to see more adoption, but this is something that time, I think, automatically brings, hopefully, because we see it's starting now, and we see that when we deliberately start with big companies like Deloitte. This is not
Yep.
just coincidence. This is because we believe that if big companies do stuff and use new technology like blockchain and DADs and all that, then it is so much easier for smaller companies to jump on the same train, because the big companies, and believe me, they really did the assessment. They assessed everything around us that we're not not planning the next drug pull and whatnot. So it's really saying that everything is sound, and that everything is legal and regulatory compliant and stuff like that. So we really took care from the beginning, and now the big assessments are through, and the small companies, they can't do those assessments. They have to trust the big companies. And if they are working with that stuff, then we can also work with that stuff. That is how it works. So I would hope to see much more usage also by smaller companies, and yeah, really getting DIDs and verifiable credentials, not necessarily only on Kilt, but I think it's really important for the world that we move to this standardized way of decentralized identities. And I hope to see Kilt as the reference implementation on blockchain for that, for all the blockchain use cases for that. That would already make me happy. Another thing which we are currently looking into a bit, I would say, is how governance actually is going to evolve. Not only the governance inside the Polkadot system, but how can actually governance from, for example, the Polkadot ecosystem be exported to other use cases, for running a DAO, for running a company, for running a city, for running a family, for running whatever needs to have a governance. How can we actually export that? And how can we identify the players in that? And if we can use Kilt as an identifier base layer for that, and then grow on the governance side. Governance for AI is also a huge
Yep.
topic currently, because who's accountable for what the AI says and all that. All these things have to be solved in a couple of years, probably. Better faster than slower. And that needs some kind of electronic governance, I would say. And the blockchain people are the only ones who can actually supply that. There's no one else out there working on that, on technology for governance. And I see Polkadot on the forefront there, because they have the most yeah, I think elaborated governance that is out there in the world, which can probably be adopted to use cases outside blockchain, which would be very interesting. And that will need an identity layer. And
Yep.
I want to have Kilt as the identity layer for that, and start building on this democracy layer or governance layer, whatever is happening there. I would see us in that direction.
Wow, it's going to be a busy 10 years.
That's 10 years, right? So this is not too
Yeah.
long.
No, it's 10 years. Yeah, it's going to be a busy 10 years. And you know, I can really see, I think you guys are so well positioned in regards to what's coming. I think, you know, you've already proven yourselves in many different areas. You're already working with the likes of Deloitte and many others out there, the power chains. You know, I think if anyone can do it, you know, Kilt Protocol stand a really good chance of being the people to do it. A bit of a closing thought. I know you'd mentioned Polkadot's OpenGov there. I'd kind of like your thoughts on the whole thing. You know, how do you think Polkadot's OpenGov has gone? I think it's a success. I think it's brought a lot of eyeballs onto it. It's not been without its controversy, but generally, I think it's been a success. What are your thoughts on Polkadot's OpenGov?
Well, it would, if it would be without controversy, then it would not be democracy. So apparently, it seems to work.
Yep.
No, I find it fascinating, to be honest, because it is evolving so fast. So like a year ago, it wasn't even OpenGov. It was still this representative model that we had before, Gov1, I think it was, and no one was really interested. And with moving it to OpenGov, people started engaging in this thing, and there's thousands of people engaged in this governance. And I see it as one of the biggest social experiments, or maybe the biggest social experiment with real people and real money, which was ever made outside a nation state. So if you are not into Polkadot governance, go into it, look at it. It is just very, very entertaining. And not only entertaining, you can also learn a lot about democracy theory, about how democracy evolves. Because we're basically coming from this this base democracy, which was like 3,000 years ago in Athens, and we start evolving on that. So what we have, for example, now is press, right? So we have quality media, like we are currently on, but in Polkadot, but we also have like a totally like yellow press stuff, which is mostly happening on Twitter, then on Telegram, of course. But you can also have all the gossip behind it, which is kind of press, and press is an important factor of a democracy. So we see these things evolving. No one planned that. It just happens, right? It seems to be natural that these things happen. We seem to have blocks of people who stick together and have certain ideas in certain directions. I wouldn't wonder if maybe in 2 or 3 months, we will see parties.
Yep.
There's no parties yet, but there will be parties, and parties will be another body of governance, actually, because they have their internal governance as well. So who's the leader of the party, who's and so on. How do you work with fractions and all these things? They can be implemented. Everything, all of that can be implemented in Polkadot. So it's really a live democracy in a way. Of course, it is like still that people with more coins can vote more, but the idea, and I always try to say that the idea of the modern democracy is just 150 years old. And if you would have told someone 400 years ago that it would be a great idea that everyone has the same voting rights, they would call you crazy,
Yep.
right? So because people who have more at stake, they always would argue should actually have more votes. So this is, I'm not saying that one option is the right one and the other is the wrong one. I'm just saying there's different options, and democracy evolves. So it might happen that in a year or in 2 years, we might see a democracy in Polkadot where everyone has one vote. Interesting how would you do that? You would do that probably with a DID, and you would have a verifiable credential which verifies that you are a single person and stuff. So again, you need Kilt, unfortunately. So there's tons of things which are actually which are happening here, and there's so much interesting discussions in the Twitter and in the Telegram groups about that, and so many people who are engaged in bringing this thing forward, and most of them, I think, don't even know that they are actually making something which is practical research on the topic of democracy while evolving in a democracy. So that is, this is fantastic to view. So if I had nothing else to do, I would 24/7 just look into what governance does today. So it is great, and I think it's also working quite nicely, to be honest. It's not, it might look a little bit chaotic when you look into it for the first time, but if you follow it for a couple of months, you know how people think, and a lot of things are actually being changed, including the democracy itself. So fantastic.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on all that. I love that. I mean, it's just the social aspect of it. It's, you know, reinvent or maybe not reinventing, but kind of changing a democracy and how it works. And I think this idea that you touch on, I always think of like Rome or something like that, where they form coalitions to, you know, win power, or you're going to see all this form. And I think with Wales voting and having such a sway, to me, that just encourages people to form coalitions and to combat that if it's something that they're against, maybe ideologically or whatever it may be, you know. And it's amazing. I mean, it's nothing short of, when you think about how far this industry's come, and I guess with technologies, because we live in a more connected world, things snowball. They get adopted a lot faster than they perhaps previously have been. So I can't wait to see where OpenGov is at in 10 years. You know, I'm sure there's a crossover there with Kilt Protocol for sure. But I think it's been a huge success. I think it's going to continue to be a success. And I think this rise of parties, you know, you might have a Gavin party or a Bill party and an Ingo party, you know, it could just be a fascinating world that we're moving towards, I think.
Yeah. And every time we do something, we always produce new problems, right? Now we have the decentralized voices,
Yep.
which is a new concept. We don't really have to explain it. It's a new concept where people have lots of voting rights, even though they're not rich, which is, first of all, a cool idea. But then now we have the problem of lobbying, right?
Yes.
Because now people turn to those people and try to convince them that they have to vote in this direction and that direction. So this is real democracy. This is how it really works. And now we have to look at, okay, well, lobbying is not bad. Lobbying has to happen because people have to be informed. Informing people is lobbying. We just have to make sure that they are informed by different directions, probably, and that they don't collude together with lobbyists and stuff like that. There's the same problems that we have in the democracy in the parliaments, right? And we have to look at the parliaments, and we have to come up with solutions for that. And we can solve that technically, or we can solve it off chain. And this is one of the most fascinating things I think about the Polkadot governance. The OpenGov stuff is brilliant technology, but a lot of stuff happens off chain. So everything that we do today is totally off chain, right? We talk. Yep. And most of the decision making is also happening off chain, right? And then it is only expressed in the democracy. Fantastic. So a system which has on chain and off chain components is actually a real, I don't know if it's a democracy or a republic, or it is something like that. It is some kind of real governance, which is not seen very often.
Outside it's fascinating. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to see how this all progresses. I can't wait to watch Kilt Protocol grow and really start to continue to get implemented in the way that we've seen it already be. You know, like I say, I really do truly believe that. I think Kilt is perfectly positioned in this kind of digital transformation and awakening of the people, you know, in regards to their own data, why they should care about it, and how they can actually do that in this decentralized manner and take power back from the cloud lords. I like to call them the cloud lords, the technocrats, whatever you want to call them, that have kind of got the world in a bit of a chokehold at the moment. So Ingo, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I'm going to leave links in the description to where people can find Kilt Protocol, where they can find yourself, where they can find your YouTube channel. There's lots of really great stuff on there. I've watched quite a few of your talks and talks from some of the team members. It's been an absolute pleasure, and it's been an educational one for me. I'm sure it has been for my audience. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you.